So this is the second part of chapter number 18, which means now we're going to complete the whole Bhagavad Gita. And we started some long time ago, and now we're reaching the final conclusion of the great scripture of the Bhagavad Gita. And this chapter is chapter number 18. And we have had a look at some of the things which Bhagavan talked about, and we're going to have a look at it again just to remind ourselves what we learned in the first part. And then we go on to think about what's coming next in the final verses of the Holy Gita. So in the first part, we saw the logic and the flow of thought, which had brought us up to that point, whereby we look at the overall picture of the guidance and the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. As we know, it is divided into the three sections. Tamasic, the first part is about the human condition, and Arjuna himself is a representation of that human condition, which is one of Shoka, Moha, and Bhaya. And Bhagavan then gives him a solution, which is then a universal solution for all the problems. So Bhagavan is not giving him a solution just for that part in the middle of the battlefield so that he can start fighting again, but really that he needs to kind of change the whole framework of his thinking. So the first 6 chapters are on the human condition, the second 6 on the divine, and the third one are the relationship between Atman and Brahman, and to take us into direction of thinking about Brahman and Atman are one. So the idea at the end of this particular series of chapters, the last 6 chapters, is to then turn our attention to this relationship between the divine and the individual, the relationship between Atman and Brahman, and to show that indeed these are one and the same thing. So we started by the question which Arjuna was asking, is to ask Bhagavan about sannyas and tyaga. Now they may look kind of very similar to on the surface, but of course Bhagavan explains that there is a difference between the two. We then saw the threefold nature of abandonment, nature of action as well, because in order to understand sannyas and tyaga, we also need to understand the nature of action itself. And Bhagavan gives us the 5 aspects of action itself, so that we can begin to think about where is it that I have to make the adjustment. Because this teaching really is about the transformation of our thought, feeling, and action, and the deepest kind of beliefs and attitudes which we have. In order to do that, then we need to learn about each and every aspect of the way in which we need to change the aspects of our action, our feelings, our thoughts, and our intentions, beliefs, and attitudes. So it gives us a clear picture so that there's no doubt in our mind what I should be doing if I want to really follow this pathway and to reach the final conclusion of reaching the state of liberation. Bhagavan then explained to us the impulse to and basis of action itself, the nature of action, impulse to action, and the basis of action itself. And that's very important for us to understand, because really speaking, we are always engaged in some kind of action. And action really becomes the main platform through which we are going to achieve our self-transformation and liberation. Then Bhagavan goes on to tell us about the threefold nature of knowledge, action, and agent, the doer, which is you and me. And why this threefold, which we are going to be seeing, is because it is described in the context of the guṇa-s. So the guṇa-s explain to us the threefold nature of Prakriti itself, threefold nature which is consisting of the Sattwic, the Rajasic, and the Tamasic natures. And then everything can be kind of looked at through that lens of the threefold attributes of nature, as it were: knowledge, action, agent, understanding, fortitude. And this becomes really the basis of our inner transformation, that we are going to adjust all these things. How are we going to adjust it? We see and we saw in the first part is that each one of these things needs to move from the Rajasic and the Tamasic towards the Sattwic way of functioning in our day-to-day transactions. And then the threefold nature of pleasure, because we've got to understand pleasure in this context as well, because we are all looking for pleasure, right? We are looking for happiness in our lives on the one hand, sukha prapti and dukkha nivritti. And those two things are really the mainstay of our expectation about life, is that whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm kind of thinking and doing, and the intentionality behind all my actions, those should lead me towards some kind of happiness. So we need to think about, yes, I'm feeling happy, but where is that happiness coming from? And that also gives us the basis of analyzing our own pleasures and happiness. And then we saw what we need to do in order to kind of orientate towards our understanding of the first part of chapter number 18. So that's where we reached in the first part. And then continuing from there, Bhagwan is now kind of going to tell us about, very nicely and very summarily, all the paths which we have looked at in so much detail. And Bhagwan, of course, being Bhagwan, he's got this amazing way of presenting something which then completely summarizes in few verses all the things which we need to keep in mind and to work in our own lives. So the path of karma, he describes according to the qualities, the path to freedom from action through knowledge, the path of knowledge itself, the path of bhakti, and then the teaching, the teacher and the taught. The teaching itself is, of course, the Bhagavad Gita and all the things which we have been talking about so far. The teacher himself is the Lord himself, and the taught are you and me. And then he talks about whoever is teaching this knowledge and so on. And then the main thing is, what is Arjuna going to decide? Is he going to sit down again and say, no, I don't want to fight, or is he going to stand up and fight? So this we'll see as well. And then Sanjay describing his own ecstasy and how he feels about just listening to this wonderful knowledge. And he begins to tell us that, what is his own experience of having listened to the Lord himself directly, this knowledge from Bhagwan Shri Krishna himself. And then the final promise to all of us, to all the people who kind of get in touch with this wonderful knowledge, begin to bring it in their own lives, and living through the Gita. So the promise of living through the Gita is what? That also we will see. So then what will we do now? We have to kind of look at the principles which Bhagwan is teaching us, the practices which is, giving us the knowledge of, and therefore we need to bring that into our own life. Because after all, the whole purpose is to bring this knowledge right into the very existence of our own selves and our lives, so that it begins to take us towards the final destination of liberation. So first of all, let's look at the previous part. We'll cover some of those things which we have already covered in the last part, but just to remind ourselves of some of these things. So Arjuna's question really is about sannyas and tyag, and what Bhagwan's response to that. So Arjuna is asking, I desire to know severally, O mighty arm, the essence or truth of renunciation and abandonment. So renunciation is sannyas, abandonment is tyaga, O slayer of Keshi Krishna. So Bhagwan says, the sages understand sannyas, renunciation, to be renunciation of works with desire. So renunciation of works with desire is one part of it. And then the abandonment of the fruits of all actions is called tyaga. So as we've been learning even in Karma Yoga, that there are two components. always coming into the picture in terms of our own experience of our life and what we are doing. I am the doer of all my actions, and I am the enjoyer of all the results of my actions, the fruits of my actions. So why am I doing any action is because I want to get the fruit of that action, and that fruit of that action is really what I'm after to give me the happiness and the pleasure. And therefore we need to think about what is Tyag talking about. It's talking about the fruit of the action, whereas sannyas is talking about renunciation of all the works which belong to desire. In other words, both these aspects are now being taken care of directly or indirectly. The doership, where I feel that I'm doer of all the works, all the actions, and these belong to my expression of my desires. On the other hand, the sense of enjoyership, which is also taken care of in terms of sannyas and tyaga. So these are important to keep in mind, is that when we talk about sannyas, it's at a much deeper level in terms of our own existence, in our understanding of ourselves, and right to the very thought process itself, that we are giving us this sankalpa sannyas. You remember at the beginning of chapter number 6, Bhagavan was talking about sankalpa sannyas, where you have to give up even the very thought which begins to arise in the intellect. And that is also related to a sense of who we are as this doer of all these actions, this individual identity which we have, that needs to also go out. And remember, the whole point of doing this is the first stage of our sadhana is purification. Purification means that we are reducing gradually the sense of me and mine. The attachments are beginning to disappear, diminish, and the sense of me as this ego individual is also diminishing, so that no trace will remain when the purification is complete. And there is no attachment at all when that purification comes to its conclusion. So what Bhagavan is saying, all action should be abandoned as evil, declare some philosophers. Now, what do we mean? Does it mean that we should not even do anything in our life, that we should just sit back and say, Bhagavan is telling me, don't do anything because all the actions are evil? But of course, if you have understood what Bhagavan is saying, he is saying, don't do actions which are identified with your own sense of individuality. In other words, actions which arise from the ego operating system, from the ego individual with egoistic selfish desire, those are evil things. So if we understand all actions to be done in this way, which means we have to give up our own selfish desires, but to be acting in the world then means what? It means we have to shift from which operating system to which operating system? From the ego operating system, we set it aside and we go to the dharma operating system. In other words, the actions are still going to go on, but you have abandoned all your selfish actions and you have now doing actions which are only related to your station and stage of life. I am a father within this family. My dharma as a father is what? It's not about what I desire and what I don't desire. It is what is the role and responsibility I have to do the things which I need to do, and that is my dharma, according to my role and responsibility. This needs to be done. It doesn't mean that we don't do any action at all. It means we shift our intentions towards the pure form of doing actions in the context of dharma. So while others declare that the act of sacrifice, gift, and austerity should not be relinquished. In other words, what I'm talking about as dharma then begins to fit into this idea that sacrifice, gift, and austerity, described in this kind of ways of thinking about it, is to say, yes, austerity should be done. What is austerity? Is to have this kind of discipline. Gift means more that you give yourself as the gift to the world, and as your transactions with the world is meant for the greater good with discipline and with sacrifice. Sacrifice at the deepest level of sacrificing our sense of even our doership and enjoyership. And if you can think in terms of these three broad categories, it is about doing our dharma. So here's what kind of we can think about, and I've shown this before, is here's the human condition, first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, and we are confronted, all of us, with this jiva vishada. Being a jiva in this world, we are going to continuously experience shoka, moha, and bhaya. Shoka is sadness, moha is delusion, bhaya is fear. And we know how much of this is around at the moment. And during COVID times, in the middle of the COVID, many people were suffering from a lot of depression and anxiety and being kind of caught up in this idea that I am the doer, enjoyer, and I'm the sufferer now. This delusion that I'm this body, mind, intellect. So that's the problem. And what Bhagwan has given us, the solution, is jiva sadhana. And at the heart of that is tyaga and sannyasa, which is going to lead us to liberation and complete elimination of shoka, moha, and bhaya. So this is now the main approach of the Bhagavad Gita. Here is Arjuna, who is the representation of humanity. He is undergoing the same things which we are going in our day-to-day life, in our transactional life. We may not be in the middle of a war or a battlefield, fighting against each other with weapons, but we are in the battlefield of life sometimes, and life can be very challenging in that kind of way. So we experience shoka, moha, bhaya all the time in various different degrees. So it can be panic, whereby the bhaya has become so much that I begin to panic, have these panic attacks. That is jiva vishada, suffering of the jiva in all its transactions and life in this way. So the solution Bhagwan is giving us is jiva sadhana, do your sadhana, which is at the basis of it, tyaga and sannyasa, giving up the sense of doership and enjoyership, and that will lead us to liberation. So karma phala tyaga, karma sannyasa, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, saguna bhakti, nirguna bhakti, and then, of course, it's going to take us to moksha. So you see how tyaga and sannyasa, then with jnana coming into it, and then dhyana, which is meditation, will take us right up to the final conclusion of our endeavors in the path of spirituality, which is taking us right up to moksha. And why this 18th chapter is also very important is because it kind of summarizes this whole pathway from jiva vishada to liberation. And what Bhagwan is kind of changing the context in terms of how he is talking about these various different pathways is to talk in the context of tyaga and sannyas, which again is another theme which has been coming throughout the Bhagavad Gita as this sense of doership, enjoyership, which we need to let go of. So then it means that we have to think about steady renunciation of fruit of action and action itself, which is phalatyaga, karma phalatyaga, and also sannyas. Disidentification from enjoyership and doership, and then absorption in the self in complete meditation. So it is a very systematic process, and it's a very systematic unfoldment of the whole spiritual pathway for us, which Bhagwan has given. And if we understand it and grasp really the beautiful kind of way in which Bhagwan has given us his knowledge, then we will also feel like what? Sanjay talks about at the end, and we'll see what Sanjay says about this whole thing. So, what are the topics which were related to Tyaga and Sannyasa? We see that in 13 to 19, the cause is the basis of Karma Yoga and action, Jnanam, knowledge, and then Karma, action, agent, Karta, Buddhi, intelligence, Dhriti, fortitude. So when Bhagwan is talking about the five aspects of action and so on, and knowledge, this is how he describes it, and also Sukham, pleasure, which we talked about just now, and then Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, which comes in this chapter, this half of the chapter, and then conclusion. Arjuna, of course, accepts what Bhagwan is telling him, and then we listen to what Bhagwan and Sanjay have to say. So this is the overall kind of scheme of the chapter, and this we also saw in the first part. So just to remind ourselves, threefold nature of abandonment. It ought to be done without attachment in a sattvic manner. Rajasic is abandonment where there is fear of bodily issues, pain is there. So we abandon something because there is fear and we feel the pain. We want to kind of throw it out of our lives. We need to get out of situation which causes pain. We need to escape from people who are also giving us physical and mental pain. And we need to get away from all these things. That is a Rajasic way of dealing with abandonment. And also that in a Tamasic way in which we abandon things is through delusion. We don't even know why we are letting go of all these things which Bhagwan is telling us to let go of. It's through delusion that I do this Tyaga. So Tyaga needs to be how? It needs to be a sattvic way of doing it. Ought to be done without attachment, which means knowledge should be there, that kind of devotion should be there. It should be abandoning the fruit of the action through understanding what Karma Yoga is, Bhakti Yoga is, Jnana Yoga is. Then impulse to action and basis of action itself. So Bhagwan says that the impulse to action, where is this impulse arising from? He says from the knowledge, the known, and the knower. So the knower is you and me, the knowledge is what we have, and the known is the object of our knowledge, which is then the basis on which our action is taken. And then the organs, the action, the agent forms the basis of action, which means I need to have some instruments which are going to allow me to carry out the action itself, and I as the doer of the actions. So it covers both these parts in terms of what is the impulse to action, what kind of propels us into action, and what is the basis of action, and what are the key components of the basis of action. So this knowledge, action, and actor, these are declared to be the science of temperaments. Of course, we have seen this gunas many times, and there's a whole chapter on the gunas, and they're of three kinds only, according to the distinctions of temperaments. So he says here these also, and this is when he describes to us the factors of action and the temperament. So the knowledge can be Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic, action also, and the actor or the agent, the knower can also be Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. So he's kind of, taking these two sets of things and describing them in this kind of manner. And then Bhagwan talked about the knowledge itself, where Sattvic knowledge is where we see one reality, undivided in the divided. So how can we look at the world and say to ourselves, there is an underlying reality? That is the Sattvic way of the knowledge. And then the Rajasic knowledge, way of knowledge is, I see distinct entities and I see each one different, and I relate to only those which are conducive to my vasanas. And then the Tamasic way of knowledge is to cling to a single effect as if it's a whole. There's no reasoning behind it. There's no truth which I'm basing my kind of knowledge on or my actions on. And this is very narrow way of thinking. This is a Tamasic knowledge. And then The action itself, Sattvic, if it is a Sattvic action, it is ordained, free from attachment, done without love or hatred, and not desires of any kind of fruit. Rajasic action is where I'm longing for something. I want to get something. I want to gain something. And I'm doing it because of my own individuality and on my own wants and needs. And with much effort. It is done with a lot of effort. Why? Because I'm so keen to get what I want that I'll make a lot of effort to get what I want. And this is the Rajasic way of carrying out action. And the Tamasic way of carrying out action is undertaken from delusion. So I don't know really, my mind is confused, some kind of, misunderstanding about various different things without regard to consequence. I'm not even thinking what's going to arise when I carry out this action. And people carry out actions which are so horrible and terrible because they're under this kind of delusion and disregard for consequences, resulting in injury, in loss, and loss of ability as well. So it's important for us as seekers to understand that our movement in action should really be towards the Sattvic. And Bhagavan has clearly outlined what that should be. And then the agent, ourselves. How are we to look at ourselves as the doer of action, non-egoistic, endowed with firmness and enthusiasm, according to the spiritual pathway, unaffected by success or failure, free from attachment? This is the way in which we need to function in the world. If you ever ask yourself this question, how should I be in the world? What should I be doing? Bhagavan has given us these answers here. So as a doer of all these actions, how should I actually function? Free yourself from attachment. Become non-egoistic. Let go of this selfishness, of this sense of individuality. Work with firmness, steadiness of knowledge, and enthusiasm about what you're doing and the purpose behind how you're carrying out your actions. And unaffected by anything, whether it's success or failure, it doesn't matter. Why? It's because we have abandoned the fruit of the action. So it doesn't matter. Whatever is going to be the result, accept it. And the Rajasic way of being an agent is to be passionate, is to be desiring the fruit of the action. I'm doing this action, I want the fruit of the action. Greediness. So that if I get something, I want more and more of that. Harmful to other people and harmful even to myself. Impure, full of delight, and grief, going up and down all the time. When I get something, I'm really happy. When I don't get anything, grief. And Tamasic, doership, unsteady, vulgar, unbending, cheating people, malicious, having bad intention towards other people, lazy, despondent, procrastinating. So you can see what we don't require. What we don't require is the Rajasic and the Tamasic way of being in the world, functioning in the world. What we need to do is to go towards the Sattvic. And then the understanding, similarly, we see that we have to move towards work and renunciation, and the renunciation of action through knowledge, and clearly understand. What do we need to understand? What ought to be done, what ought not to be done. Fear and fearlessness, the difference between the two. Bondage and liberation. And if we understand it clearly, then our thoughts will then align with that. Our feelings will also align. And our actions will align because we have a proper understanding of the path of action and the path of renunciation. Rajasic understanding, it wrongly understands the dharma, adharma. There is confusion in the mind about whether this is dharma or not dharma, is because now the ego is also confused in terms of what it should be doing, because it's been used to working as an individual with all this kind of selfish desires. So it gets confused. Is this my dharma or is this my vasana which is talking? What ought to be done, what ought not to be done is also under confusion. And then Tamasic understanding is enveloped in darkness, no idea of anything. or very little idea of various different things. And here the mistake is that I say to myself, I'm doing dharma, but actually I'm doing adharma. And I can't make this distinction. And all things become perverted. So this is how now Bhagwan is explaining the kind of basis of action, and fortitude is then the other element of action, that whatever we do, it should have this fortitude, this strength behind it. Through yoga, through the functions of the mind, controlling the prana, controlling the senses, restraint of the senses, when that discipline is there together with the fortitude, the strength, the inner strength, then that will lead us towards the final goal. Whereas the Rajasic fortitude is what? It holds fast to duty, pleasure, wealth. Now you may say, oh, why is he talking about duty? Actually, the Rajasic way of holding on to duty is something very peculiar, because when somebody holds on to doing something and saying, I'm not going to do anything else, is because this is a kind of egoistic way of doing your duty. Therefore, you hold on fast to doing a particular thing. And then pleasure and wealth from attachment, craving for the fruits of the action, all this is a Rajasic strength. And the Tamasic inner strength is what? Unsteady, vulgar, unbending, cheating, malicious, and so on and so on. So the path of karma according to the qualities now. So let's, having kind of got the glimpse of what we discussed in the first part of it, now we go to the second part, which is now going to talk about each one of these pathways very briefly, but very focused in terms of what we need to understand and what we need to do. So Bhagavan starts by the path of karma according to the qualities again, according to the gunas. And he says there is no being on earth, or again even in heaven, amongst the devas, heavenly beings, who is totally liberated from the three qualities born of Prakriti. There's no being on earth. Okay, so not on earth or again in heaven, who is totally liberated from the three qualities. So even if there is, a very pure personality, that purity is also limited by the Sattvic guna. In other words, that unless we have become liberated through self-realization, we cannot be liberated from the three gunas, any one of them or a mixture of them. So that's why Bhagavan is making this very categorical statement that no being on earth or even in heaven is totally liberated from the three qualities, as long as they're functioning within this context of the individuality. So then the qualities, Bhagavan is saying, it is really born out of Prakriti. And if you think about these three qualities, it gives rise to 4 different temperaments. And what Bhagavan is saying is that when this is working through Prakriti, these gunas, which are attributes of Prakriti, if we kind of look at them and look at the temperament of people, then they will be doing something which is related to their own nature according to the mixture of the gunas which make up the temperament. So Brahmanas, for example, will have a predominantly sattvic nature. The others are there, of course. Rajasic and Tamasic is there, but the predominant guna is sattvic. And the predominant guna of the last one is Shudras, is Tamasic. In between, we got a mixture of what you call Sattvic and Rajasic, which makes up the Kshatriyas, and Rajasic and Tamasic, which makes up the Vaishyas. So Brahmana is purely Sattvic, or to a large extent Sattvic. Then Kshatriyas are a mixture of Sattvic and Rajasic. So they behave in a knowledgeable, noble manner, and they are the leaders of groups and communities and societies, and then Vaishyas who are interested in attaining something. So Rajasic element is very much there, but they also have this kind of Tamasic tendency of doing things in delusion without knowing what they're doing, and uh, the 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 bigger picture is missing out of their lives, and the Shudras are working in their own way and through whatever we have been describing so far in terms of delusion and in terms of ignorance. And if we look at the duties in the sense of not duties as duties, but actions which are carried out by these four categories and four temperaments, these are according to the qualities born out of their own nature. So what we need to understand here is that it doesn't matter if we are born in a Brahmin family. Our temperament may be completely different from being a Brahmin. Being born in a Brahmin family does not necessarily mean that you're going to have a Brahmic temperament. So it is born out of our own nature, is meaning that we have carried all this conditioning from our past lives. And in this present life, those are the gunas which are going to be expressing in our current life. So if you want to know what you were in the past life, examine your life right now and ask yourself, what am I doing with my life? And if you see that, there is a lot of interest in spiritual knowledge, the spiritual pathway, that means we have already done some work in our past lives, which has brought us to this point whereby we are now on the spiritual pathway, but still Grahastha ashram, but in the spiritual pathway. Very few people actually jump straight into the sannyas pathway, like we saw in the earlier chapters, that pathway is available, but very few people will choose to do that. So what are the qualities of the Brahmana and the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas and the Sudras? This is what is going to tell us in 42 to 44. And in 45, he says, devoted each to his own action duty, man attains perfection. How engaged in his own duty, he attains perfection. So what Bhagavan basically is saying that according to your temperament, do the things which you need to do because there is a solution to that, and you don't have to go into a kind of different temperament altogether, but you can steadily work on yourself according to wherever you are engaged with in order to attain perfection. Which means that, if I'm a Brahmin, then I will, through my Brahmic temperament, there are things which I enjoy doing, there are things which I like doing. And, pursuit of knowledge, for example, is common to those with a Brahmic temperament. And therefore, knowledge then becomes my way of doing things in the world. And the pathway for that is the path of knowledge. Kshatriyas, on the other hand, will have, very much action, very much to the forefront. So they will go on the path of action. Then Vaishyas is that they will look at, maybe bhakti and action combined together. And Sudras will look for something which is related to the physical well-being like yoga, and then progress gradually towards towards liberation, towards perfection. So it means that nobody is ruled out. Whatever your starting point is, Bhagwan has given us a pathway which will take us right up to perfection and liberation. So Brahmins, serenity, self-restraint, austerity, purity, forgiveness, uprightness, knowledge, realization, belief in God. Now, if we have any of these qualities and all of these qualities, which means our temperament is one of a Brahmin. And then Kshatriya. So Kshatriyas will show prowess, splendor, firmness, dexterity, and also not fleeing from battle, which means that they will stay in the battle and fight it out. Generosity is also there. Lordliness, leadership is also there. This is the temperament of the Kshatriyas. Then the Vaishyas, agriculture, cattle rearing, trade. Now you can imagine Bhagwan is talking, during that context and that time. But here we are talking about all kinds of professions, all kinds of trades and so on. And then Shudras, we will be having people who are doing perhaps manual things and so on. So we can see the temperaments of each one of these, and according to those qualities, we will then function and find our own pathway towards liberation. So for whom is the evolution of all beings, by whom all this is pervaded, worshipping him with one's own duty, man attains perfection. So this is the general principle. What we are saying is that for whom evolution of all beings, in other words, who is the creator? Who is pervading this creation? And who are we worshipping as this divine entity and doing one's duty? Man attains perfection. So this is the path of karma. Karma means that, wherever we are in terms of whatever temperament we have, we choose that pathway, do our actions according to the 5-point plan Bhagavan gave us in chapter number 3. And that according to that, if we do our actions and do our dharma in the way in which it's prescribing to us here, then perfection will be attained. This is the path of karma yoga. What Bhagavan then says is better it is to do one's own duty, which may not be 100%, than the duty of another well performed. In other words, don't try to do other people's job, or try to think that you got a temperament of another category, and then you want to do things according to that. Actually, it will not even work. Okay, it may not even work, because if your temperament is very Rajasic, then somebody tells you to, sit down and learn something, study something, do meditation. It may not be conducive in that case. So what Bhagavan is saying in a general way, that doing one's duty according to the temperament is better, even if you don't do it well, than to do somebody else's duty, even if you think that you're doing it well. Because if you do it in this way, then there is no incurring of any sin. So one should not abandon, Kwanteya, the duty to which one is born, though faulty, for all, not all undertaking enveloped by evil as fire by smoke. So Bhagavan is saying everything is going to be, tainted in one way or the other. But the main thing for us to do is don't abandon the duty to which we find ourselves in which we are born, or we kind of, develop in our lifespan. So that is the path of Karma Yoga, which Bhagavan has now put it within the context of Tyaga and Sannyasa. And this is how he is explaining to us within this particular context of the gunas as well. Then the pathway to freedom from action through knowledge. So we know that, if you want to make the transition from Karma Yoga to the path of knowledge, then there is a steady kind of renunciation of action through knowledge, which means that I'm giving up this sense of I'm the doer of all these actions. So he whose intellect is unattached everywhere, intellect is not attached anywhere, it is free from all the attachments which are external, internal, and who has subdued this sense of ego self. In other words, the doership and joyership has gone, and for whom desire has fled. There's no desire, because he's functioning according to a different kind of system altogether. And when one is given up the attachments and subdued the self, and desire has gone through renunciation, then what happens? Attains the supreme state of freedom from action. So freedom, not freedom of action, but freedom from action through an understanding about ourselves. And if I understand myself to be not this body, mind, intellect, but that which is the supreme, that is the pathway whereby I become free from all action by taking myself to be the supreme Brahman. And when I am looking at action from that perspective, there is actionlessness. Bhagavan has already described that to us. Said you become completely free from action. Doesn't mean that you're not going to do any action, but it means that there is no identification with any action which is being done. So freedom from action through knowledge. And the knowledge is what? Knowledge is that I am not this individual ego. I am that which is Atman. I am that which is Brahman. Then Bhagavan goes on to tell us about the path of knowledge. How he who has attained perfection reaches Brahman, that in brief too, you learn from me, he says, the supreme state of knowledge. So here again, endowed with a pure intellect, which means the intellect has become pure of what? It has become pure of Rajasic and Tamasic tendencies. It has given up this attachment to the fruit of the action. It has also given up the kind of identification with the body, mind, intellect, controlling the self by firmness. This sense of, doership, which is now diminished by the pure intellect. There is firmness in control, keeping it under control, and then relinquishing the senses and all the things which are available to the senses, abandoning attraction and aversion. Raga dvesha is given up, and therefore pure intellect, firmness in controlling the self, relinquishing sense and sense objects, and then attraction and aversion to things around us and also within us, which then means that dwelling in solitude, eating but little, speech, body, and mind subdued, always engaged in meditation and concentration, taking refuge in dispassion. Now we can say Bhagavan is painting a picture for us of somebody who has attained perfection, and perfection through what? Through knowledge. And this then leads to the supreme state of knowledge, jnana-nishtha. So anybody who is having these qualities and cultivating them and expressing them in their lives in this very kind of, clear way, then Bhagavan is saying that these people will reach the supreme state of knowledge, jnana-nishtha, becoming established in the true knowledge, the supreme knowledge. So think about all these things. Are we having this pure intellect? Are we having this various different other things which Bhagavan is telling us? Eating little, speaking little, body and mind subdued, always engaged in meditation one way or the other, concentration and dispassion. Dwelling in solitude, of course, that might be a bit difficult physically, but of course we are talking about mental solitude, which is something different. So all these things, if we have it, then he who has attained perfection reaches Brahman, the supreme state of knowledge, jnana-nishtha. And telling us further, what is the other side of it? Is that having attained those qualities, these are the ones which have been given up. Egoism, which means this sense of individuality, which is based on I am this person. Power, which means I have got the power to do things, attain things, get things. This kind of arrogance, which is there, that I am the person who is able to do all these things. There is desire, constant desire. There is anger there. There is this sense of, I am a grand person. I am a big, individual existing in the world. Egoism, power, arrogance, desire, anger, aggrandizement. These are the things which have been thrown out of this person who is on the path of knowledge. And the lesson for us is here what? Look at these things, what Bhagavan is saying, abandon those things. Have we got to the point whereby we can start working on this? We can slowly let go of it, or even quickly if we can let go of it. Throw these things out of your life, out of your mind, out of your thoughts and your feelings and your actions as well. And freed from the notion of mind and so peaceful, so peaceful. He is fit to become Brahman. So something needs to be abandoned completely and something needs to be cultivated, which Bhagavan has already told us in 52. This is what we need to do. Abandon, this is what we need to get in our lives. And becoming Brahman, serene in the self, he neither grieves nor desires. Complete stillness in the self, complete silence, complete peace, which this person who has now become Brahman, realization, everything which belonged to the ego has disappeared. No shoka, no moha, no bhaya, everything is gone. He neither grieves nor desires, in a state of complete equanimity. The same to all beings, he obtains the supreme devotion towards me. Same to all beings, which means that he sees everything equally, samatvam, which again Bhagavan is saying is really what comes to this person of supreme knowledge. And not only that, but supreme devotion towards me. And that devotion is about, not maybe we can think of it as saguna bhakti, but really supreme devotion is that which arises in the state of realization. By devotion, he knows me in essence, what and who I am. Again, we can think of me as Bhagavan describing me. In this case, he says he knows me in essence, which is what is the ultimate truth about myself. I'm this avatar who you see in front of me, but there is the essence which is the substratum of this very creation. Like you remember, Bhagavan gave the vision of this to Arjuna, and he says, this is really, if you look at it, and I give you the special eyes to see my Virat Swarup. So Bhagavan says, if he knows me in my essence, what I am, who I am, then this is actually the one who has attained the supreme knowledge, and he has realized and he has become Brahman. And then having known me in my essence, he forthwith enters the supreme. Immediately, forthwith. No waiting, because he has now got the pass. He has passed the exam. He can go into the supreme. So then Bhagavan is now going to describe to us the path of bhakti. So here, bhakti, what does it mean? Doing all actions, always taking refuge in me. Refuge is taking Sharanagati. By my grace, he obtains the eternal, indestructible state or abode. And Bhagavan in returns gives the grace. With the grace of Bhagavan, he obtains the eternal and the ultimate indestructible abode, which is then done how? He says, mentally renouncing all action in me as the highest goal, resorting to Buddhi Yoga, ever fix your mind in me, fixing your mind upon me, you shall, by my grace, overcome all obstacles. But if from egoism you will not hear me, you shall perish. So now, this may look as if we are talking about path of action. But of course, we know that the path of action and the path of bhakti come together in this way in which Bhagavan is talking within the context of sannyas and tyaga. Remember that he is talking bhakti from that point of view and bringing all these points to make us understand what is it that we have to renounce, what is it that we have to give up, what is it that we have to abandon, and therefore fixing all these things in the context of bhakti means fixing mind upon me, taking refuge in me, and then with my grace and you doing your work in terms of all the actions, resorting to Buddhi Yoga, fixing your mind in me, then this becomes like a bhakti devotion to the Lord. So filled with egoism, if you think, I will not fight. Remember, Arjuna said right at the very beginning, I'm putting down my bow and arrow. I'm not going to fight anymore. And what Bhagavan is saying, actually, what made you to do this? How is it that you're saying that I'm not going to fight? And you put your instrument of battle on the floor is because of this egoism. Egoism means what? I am this individual who has overcome, who has been overwhelmed by this grief, this vishad. When I look at the kith and kin in front of me, my elders, my teachers, my gurus, and I say, I will have to kill all these people. And you as an individual looking at the other people in front of you, saying that I am going to be the killer of all these people, and therefore it fills me with grief, it fills me with anxiety, and therefore my pathway, my solution to that is I will not fight. Vain in this your resolve, for nature will compel you. So what does it mean? We saw that earlier on, Bhagavan was talking about the different temperaments. And a certain way of looking at this is that the Rajasic tendencies also, there is this Sattvic tendency as well. Why? Because he's coming up with some kind of justification which is based on higher values. And therefore he says, I will not fight because I think, in this case, killing of my elders and so on is not really a good thing. So what his nature is compelling him to do is exactly what in this case he is doing. And then he says, bound by your own karma, action born out of your own nature, that which through delusion you wish not to do, even that you shall do helplessly. In other words, that what we are doing in our life, if you put all the sadhanas away, if you put all the kind of tapas away, austerities away, if you put the control out of the window, then what is going to drive us? What is going to drive us is our own nature, our own temperament, our own past conditioning, helplessly. Because there's no buddhi yoga, there's no control, there's no tapas, there's no austerity. And when there is no control, what controls is our inner temperament. That inner temperament naturally kind of expresses itself in the thought, which turns into desire with the help of the mind. And that desire is then propelling us to go out and do our actions. And we are bound by our own karma, which are born out of our own nature, and helplessly we are going and doing things. Which means what? That if you don't take care, then just like Arjuna is kind of being driven by his own nature, will be driven by our own nature, and that means we are going to be bound. We're going to be bound by these actions because they are based on our vasanas, on our inclination and tendencies, and we are doing things according to that. Very simply put, it means I am in the ego operating system, which is managed by my vasanas. My vasanas is the raw material for that machine to keep on running. And if I don't intervene or don't control, then that is my default position. And, it's very hard to get out of our default position because, we are helplessly driven, like Bhagavan is saying here. So the Lord dwells in the heart of all beings, causing all beings by his elusive power to revolve as if mounted on a machine. In other words, the sentiency which we have, in other words, the capacity and the energy and the power to do things in the world is only because the Lord is sitting in our heart. He is the power behind all the prakriti. He is the power behind all the gunas which are operating is the power behind why I'm talking to you right now. I'm talking to you, and that capacity is only coming to me because I'm sentient, I'm awake, I'm aware, I'm in a state of consciousness where I'm speaking about things. And where is this power coming from? This power, Bhagavan is saying, is coming from me dwelling in your heart. So we are helplessly doing things, but the power behind this really machinery, which is being driven at the level of the body, mind, intellect, is Bhagavan himself, the power behind everything. So what Bhagavan says is, fly unto him for refuge. So he's giving two scenarios. One is that either you helplessly keep on doing the things which you're doing because your temperament is going to push you in that direction, or you go towards the Lord and you take refuge in with all your being. Take everything of yourself and give it to the Lord. Take refuge in him. And by his grace, you shall obtain supreme peace and eternal abode. So clearly Bhagavan is giving us the path of bhakti, whereby we have to abandon a certain way of being in the world. At the same time, Bhagavan is saying, take refuge in me, because if you take refuge in your own ego identity, you will be in trouble. You'll be bound and helplessly doing the things which you're doing, and you'll keep yourself where you are. But if you take refuge in me, and by my own grace, you shall obtain the supreme peace and the eternal abode. So now here comes the thing which Bhagavan is going to ask Arjuna. He says, the wisdom which is greatest secret than all the secrets, which is the greatest secret than all the secret, has been declared to you by me. Bhagavan is saying, I have given you the greatest secret of this life, this individuality, the totality of the universe, and even what is the substratum of this whole universe. All those secrets have been given to you, and I've also given you the method by which you're going to get away from this ego individuality and how you're caught up and bound by your actions to a state of liberation. I've given you all this secret, having reflected upon fully. Important to note, reflected upon fully, you now act as you choose. See how Bhagavan is giving him all the freedom to make his own mind up and then to choose. Because Bhagavan has given him, because he is his friend and he is his devotee. And therefore, he is giving him this supreme knowledge, secret of all secrets. And he says, now you decide, you choose what you want to do after having reflected upon it fully. Now that in itself, reflected upon it fully, you can talk about it for 10 minutes. We are running out of time, but basically it means there is a whole process of reflection which will bring clarity, which will bring comprehension, which will bring conviction, and which will bring commitment, the 4 C's. That is the process of reflection which you need to carry out fully so that you make your commitment now. And the commitment is what? I am going to now make my choice based on that systematic reflection and clarification, comprehension, conviction. So Bhagavan says, here again my supreme word, most secret of all, because you are dearly beloved of me, therefore I will tell you what is good for you. Bhagavan is kind of telling you, okay, you make up your mind, but let me have the final word. I'll summarize everything for you. Fix your mind upon me, be devoted to me, sacrifice for me, surrender to me. You shall surely then come to me alone. Truly, I do promise you, for you are dear to me. Bhagavan is a very good salesman as well. So he's saying, here is what I've been telling you. You decide. That's not an issue. You decide, but reflect upon it fully. And this is what I'm telling you. fix your mind on me, devote it to me, sacrifice to me, surrender to me, you shall come to me. Truly, I do promise. I make this promise, and therefore take that into account as well. So then, abandoning all dharmas of the body, mind, intellect, take refuge in me alone. I will liberate thee from all sins. Don't grieve, because I'm going to liberate you from everything. Okay, and this is a famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which says, abandon all dharma, body, mind, intellect, and just take refuge in me alone, and I will liberate you from all the sins. And sarva dharma, make, abandon, tyaga, all the dharmas of the body, mind, intellect, and don't grieve, because I will liberate you from all the sins. This is never to be spoken by you to one who is devoid of austerities or devotion. So, in other words, if there is no austerity or devotion, then don't bother to speak to anybody about this this knowledge. Don't speak about this knowledge, secret of secrets, the greatest secret, because if somebody is devoid of austerities or devotion, it's not going to be of much use. Nor to one who does not render service. So, austerities, devotion, service. If somebody is already engaged in that, then you can speak about this knowledge, because they're already kind of having this devotion and austerity. Nor to one who desire not to listen. Why bother telling people about this thing, because they're not going to even open up their ears to listen. Forget about that. Don't waste your time. And then, no to the one who cavils at me. Somebody is constantly criticizing this knowledge, criticizing Bhagwan. Don't be speaking of this to any one of these people. Devoid of austerities or devotion, does not render service, who desires not to listen, and so on. So now Bhagwan has given him the choice. He says, okay, I've given you all the secrets. I've given you addendum to the whole knowledge which I've given you. And I've brought you to the point of understanding that this knowledge is, I promise you that if you follow what I've been telling you, my guidance, then you will get liberated. Don't grieve. And then Bhagwan is now going to tell us about the teaching. He who with supreme devotion to me will teach this supreme secret to my devotees shall doubtless come to me. So Bhagwan is saying, okay, I'm teaching you this, but anybody who is, teaching this with supreme devotion to me, I'm doing it not for my own sake, but if somebody is doing for the sake of Krishna, with supreme devotion, and teach this supreme secret to the devotees, then doubtless they will come to me. So make sure what? Make sure you also start teaching Bhagavad Gita, but not to the people Bhagwan mentioned just now. Leave those people out. Those who are willing to listen and willing to understand without criticizing, and have got austerities, devotion, and a bit of service. Those are the people you need to kind of start talking to them about this supreme secret. Nor is there any amongst men who does dearer service to me. See, Bhagwan is saying, if you really want to please me, if you want doubtlessly to come to me, then start spreading the word of the Bhagavad Gita. Nor shall there be another on earth dearer to me than this person who is teaching this knowledge to the devotees. And he who will study this sacred dialogue of ours between you and me, this dialogue which is consisting of 700 verses, 18 chapters, I shall have been worshipped by the sacrifices of wisdom, which we already have done. You see, going through the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, this is our yajna, this is our jnana yajna. And therefore he says, those who will study this sacred dialogue, that means that they have worshipped me. And if that is the thing, then my conviction is I will have been worshipped by jnana, what you call jnana yajna, and therefore they will be very dear to me and they will come to me. That man also who hears this, full of faith, free from malice, he too liberated shall attain to the happy worlds of those righteous deeds. So Bhagavan again, telling us again that, hear this knowledge, full of faith, free from any kind of aversion or any kind of doubt or malice. You will get liberated and attain to the happy worlds of the righteous deeds. And what Bhagavan is saying is that, you know, um, has the distraction caused by ignorance? Have you been listening to this single pointed? And I hope you have been also listening to this single pointed. He says, has the distraction caused by ignorance, avidya, has it been dispelled? Because he was distracted, right? Arjuna was distracted from doing what he was supposed to be doing, which is to fight in the middle of the battlefield, which was caused by ignorance. Bhagavan has given him the knowledge. He has listened to it single-pointedly. And he's asking, has this now ignorance been dispelled for Dhananjaya? This is now the important question again. Bhagavan is telling him, has your ignorance been dispelled? And what Arjuna decides to do, he says, destroyed is my delusion. My delusion is gone. And I have now gained my memory. Memory means that knowledge has come to me. I have now understood, I have reflected, I have listened to you carefully, and through your grace, I am now firm. Firm in my conviction, firm in my faith. My doubts are gone. Delusion is gone. I've attained this knowledge with your grace, and I will do according to your bidding, your word. So Arjun has now decided what he wants to do, how he's going to do it. Delusion is gone. He is now in a state of complete knowledge. His doubts are gone. And what has Bhagavan been telling him? Stand up and fight. So Arjuna is now listened to this knowledge. He's going to take action. He's made his decision, and now he's going to stand up and fight. So this brings us to the kind of end of this conviction, which comes to Arjuna, and his delusion has gone through the knowledge Bhagavan has given him, the secret of all secret Bhagavan has so kindly given to him, full of compassion, just like he's giving to us right now, is that he's telling us, this is the word of Bhagavan. So Sanjay, remember Sanjay, might have forgotten because he came right at the front. Sanjay is telling Dhritarashtra about whatever is going on the battlefield because he has got this vision as well. He says, thus I have heard this wonderful dialogue between Vasudeva and the high soul Partha, which causes the hair to stand on end. This is Sanjay talking about how he is feeling when he's listening to this wonderful dialogue between Vasudeva and high soul Partha, between Krishna and Arjuna. And he says there's so much there, this listening just to this wonderful dialogue, my hair is standing on end. And if at any point during this dialogue, listening to this knowledge, if your hair has stood on end, that means you have made this wonderful connection with the knowledge. And I'm sure that you must have experienced some of this wonderful thing which Bhagavan has given us and made your own hair to stand on it. And through the grace of Vyasa, who has kind of given us this, written it down, I have heard the supreme and most secret yoga directly from Krishna, the Lord of Yoga himself declaring it. See, the master who is the Lord of the universe, who is the very divine manifestation of Brahman in Saguna Brahman with a name and a form of Krishna, the Lord of Yoga himself declaring this knowledge to Arjuna, and Sanjay has heard it through the grace of Vyasa directly from Krishna. Imagine how wonderful that must have been. So remembering this wonderful and holy dialogue between Keshava and Arjun, I rejoice again and again. Rejoice, very happy, ecstatic, remembering and again remembering the most wonderful form of Hari. Great is my wonder, O King, and I rejoice again and again and again. You can imagine Sanjay is standing up and dancing, ecstasy, with hair standing on end, and remembering again the wonderful form of Hari. And the promise to all of us, wherever there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, wherever there is Partha, the archer, and there is going to be prosperity, victory, happiness, and firm, steady or sound policy. In other words, this is what is going to be derived if we are in the presence of Krishna and Arjuna. If we are going to listen to this dialogue, if we are going to reflect on it, and we bring it into our own lives, living through the Gita means there's going to be prosperity, there's going to be victory, there's going to be happiness, and there is going to be the ultimate realization of the truth, liberation through renunciation. This is the promise of Bhagavan to each one of us. So remember, we have to listen to it as Sanjay has been listening and Arjuna has been listening, and to reflect on this knowledge again and again, and it will bring us tremendous amount of happiness in our own lives, victory, prosperity. And of course, Bhagavan is saying, this is my conviction, Bhagavan's own conviction. This is where we will get to. That brings us to the end of the Bhagavad Gita and the wonderful dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. And of course, this is not the end of it. We have to go right back to the starting point and then start all over again through conscious spiritual living, understanding the principles, getting them into our own lives through practice, 4As, 4Bs, 4Cs, 4Ds, which are mentioned in every lesson, and therefore, consciously living this principle and the method of the Bhagavad Gita. So again, listen, read, reflect on content of 18 plus, starting all over again, reflect on, understand the nature of renunciation, abandonment, and how they operate in our own lives, prepare a plan to cultivate the Sattwic forms of action, knowledge, agency, understanding, fortitude, because that is where the practical aspects are. And Bhagavan has given us so much through his compassion. Has given us very clear instruction as what we need to do. Contemplate on the references to renunciation, abandonment given by Bhagavan in the previous chapters as well. Consider how these can be practiced in your own life. Continue to practice all other techniques from the previous chapters. Prepare and execute a daily intensified plan of meditation as well, which I'm sure you have, and enjoy the sadhana. Stay safe and stay well. Hari Om, and thank you very much.